Welcome to this week's edition of Tech Sales Advice, folks. My name is Chris White, of course. I am your host, and this is the LinkedIn Live show for technical sales professionals and technical sales leaders. And these are live conversation, folks. As I like to say, these conversations are unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. And we had a touch of unpredictable activity just a moment ago as we were scrambling to get our technology right. So we're just a few minutes late, but that doesn't mean I'm any less excited for this conversation. I'm joined by a gentleman named Clifford Barcliff. He is a seasoned technical sales professional and as he likes to self-proclaim, a seasoned tech evangelist. And the reason he's on the show is because he has attended a number of these sessions as a guest and has chimed in a number of times with some noteworthy comments, to the point where I reached out to him after the fact because I just wanted to meet this Clifford Barcliff who kept chiming in on my sessions. And during our conversation, he said to me, you know, Chris, I used to tell people I sell weekends. And that struck a chord with me. And I said, Cliff, I need to have you join one of these calls and actually be on video and share some of what you have shared with me. And here we are. Cliff, thank you for being here, sir. Nice to see you. How are you doing today?
Thanks. This is going to be a lot of fun. I always enjoy the show. And folks, it really is unscripted. Let me tell you, you have no idea. To the point where I don't know what's going to happen. So, you just said that one line and that's all you told me. So it's based off that one line.
Yeah, that's it. Well, and that's what I love about these conversations. And let's be fair, Cliff. I mean, to me, this is the role of a technical sales professional. Is we can and look, I think you may be a little bit familiar with my 6 habits. I talk a lot about preparing and practicing, but the reality is we need to enter every conversation and every meeting prepared to pivot and turn, right? So that's why I love it, because I feel like it puts our very skills on display. So, and by the way, may I call you Cliff?
Fine. Okay? Cliff is fine.
Clifford,
in at expos, in the big halls where you got 1,000 vendors. If I say Cliff, people mishear it, right? They call me Chris. No offense.
That's quite okay.
And Cliff, and of course, people remember the name.
Yes.
But once I get past that, it's definitely Cliff.
Cliff is good. Okay, excellent. So Cliff, I introduced you as a seasoned technical sales professional, and you said that you like to call yourself a tech evangelist. Do you mind introducing yourself a little bit more broadly and share sort of how you ended up in this role of technical evangelist?
Sure. The more I hear and listen to other folks on your show and talking to fellow SEs, none of us have a standard way of getting to where we got to. It doesn't seem like there's one path. All the paths are irregular, which is the only commonality, I think. So for me, it started when I was asked to leave university the first time due to poor grades. And really, the first time. And which applies, there's a second time. And there is. So, my parents weren't very happy, but they weren't mad at me. But they said, hey, okay, you tried school. It didn't work for you. Okay, rent starts next month. And so I went out and got, I got 2 part-time jobs. One, we won't talk about today, but I kind of mentioned it on one of your previous shows when you interviewed a musician, that I started as a choir director. I got a paid gig as a choir director.
Which is amazing. Yeah.
And then I got my first job in technology. I was doing data entry for a small law firm. And this law firm was doing slip and falls and workman's comp, very repetitive work. And they were not tech savvy at all, but were aware. And knew that they could benefit from automation. And so they bought into this law office automation tool, event management. And the reason why is, law, when things happen, they're all driven off of schedules. There's defined timelines. If you miss a deadline, you missed it. And that's it. You can't, the judge won't give you a pardon or anything. You missed it, you missed it. If it's by second, it's done.
Yeah.
So they were doing these cases that were very similar. And so this software allowed them to not miss any deadlines.
Mm.
So when the person walked in the front door, said, I had a workman's comp thing, boom, the clock starts ticking. And all these events get created in the system so
Yeah.
that when the paralegals and the admins and attorneys walked in the morning, they had a list of things that had to get done,
That day.
had to get done, could not
Yeah.
miss it. So anyway, they hired me to help them use it, but also get data into it. So there I was taking all the briefs and all the filings and all the correspondence and marking it up, coding it, and helping drive the data entry into the system.
Yeah.
This is all manually done. That was running on an x86 Xenix for
Oh,
all you folks that have been out there for a long time, right? The precursor to today's Linux. I guess it was SCO Xenix, I think it was.
wow.
And eventually, I learned about root, and then I learned a lot about the system to the point where they were never calling the software company anymore. And
Mm.
so I turned it. They became my customer,
Wow.
and I said, "Hey, look, you're paying them. I think it was like $5,000 a year for support. Pay me $3,000,
Love that.
and I will get somebody to do. I'll help somebody else do my job, and I will just do maintenance. That's it."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I learned a couple of valuable lessons. One, the importance of backups. One
Mm.
day when I got a panic phone call in the middle of the week from one of the attorneys, hey, the system's not working. I have to take a subway and a train into downtown Philadelphia. I get in there and nothing's working. I'm figuring some things out. And I figure, there's some hardware failure,
Mm.
disk drive.
Mm.
So I get the disk drive replaced. I take my handy dandy backup tapes to find out that my backups weren't valid.
Oh.
So I had a whole stack of tapes, went to the last valid backup tape and reconstructed as much to make it work. We lost a lot of data.
Mm.
So I learned my first valuable lesson, right, in IT is you're only good as your last restore.
Amen. Isn't it funny how the most valuable lessons sometimes are from the most painful mistakes?
Yeah, very painful. But I learned even a more important lesson.
Mm.
The second lesson I learned is they could not function without
Mm.
it. Right, all those deadlines, and not just the deadlines, but the velocity
Mm.
of work. If you think about today's electronic medical record systems, if you've been to your clinic before they invented EMR and after EMR, it's a much different experience.
Yeah.
Those hospitals cannot keep their beds as full as they do. They
Yeah.
can't keep the people as busy as they can
Yeah.
without all that automation. So this is what happened. This is back, by the way, in the mid 80s. So here's this law firm. They just can't, like, first of all, they couldn't take any new people
Mm.
for a few weeks while they caught up with manual process and getting things back again. So I realized that some IT, this is where the value of IT, this is where it got ingrained in me that IT serves a purpose. And it's not for itself, right? It's for a certain outcome.
Mm.
And so that was my first inkling on, why I do what I do,
Mm.
right?
That's so
It's
so powerful.
it's part of solving that problem, right? If you if you go to TED Talks, and you probably know Simon Sinek and his Golden Circle TED Talk.
Yep.
Folks out there, if you haven't gone and see it, and it's about 18 minutes. Pick the longer one, and he has two takeaways. One is, people don't buy what you sell; they buy why you sell it. But even more important, the very last thing he says is, if people believe what you believe, they don't do it for you; they do it for themselves.
Mm.
And when I internalized that, that's when I became a tech evangelist.
Mm.
I get people to believe what I believe.
Yeah.
And if you remember last week, your guest said about the customer doesn't care about your product until they
Mm.
know you care about them.
Mm. Yeah.
So the things I do as a tech evangelist, one is I get people to believe that I care about them, because I do. I've been my customer. And two, I have certain beliefs about the technology and what it can do.
Mm.
So if I can get them to believe that without having to go into the speeds and the feeds and the tech stuff,
Yeah.
I'm like 3/4 of the way to a sale.
100%.
And then at that point, the customer's then asking me, okay, I believe that. I understand that. Now show me. And once the customer says, show me, well, you're good, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to show them 100 pages of POCs or documents or demos.
Yeah.
They already believe it. And now they want to see exactly what it will do for them. And they'll tell you what exactly they want to see. And all of a sudden, anything you do after that is very focused to the outcome that the customer's looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. I so love so many of the things that you said. And I'm working backwards a little bit. One of the things that I ask a lot of the clients that I work with is, what is it that your prospects and customers need to understand, or what is it that they need to believe, to the point where your solution is just the obvious answer,
Mhm.
right? And if you think about it that way, we're not really selling products, we're selling ideas.
Mhm.
And if we can get our ideas aligned with their ideas and vice versa, or help them understand how the ideas and beliefs that we have will help them achieve what they care about most, then to your point, the solution sale, the product sale sort of takes care of itself, right?
Yeah.
But I
You
think
still have, you're
too
right. You still have
many,
to do the work.
yeah, of course. But too many people want to just lead with the product, focus on the product. And
By the way, there's a second outcome to
please.
this idea, and that is when your competitors come in behind you,
Mm,
the customers already agreed on what they believe. So unless the competitor says exactly the same thing, right? I've already believed what Cliff says. I
right.
agree. It makes sense to me. Anybody else that comes in better say those things, or that's a much harder sale.
100%. Well, and to that point, all the more reason to be involved earlier in the process
Mhm.
and help them shape the way they think about how to solve the problem or achieve what it is that they're trying to achieve, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's all about, for me, it's about knowing what great looks like for your customer.
Mm,
And if you convince them that this is what great looks like, well, they want that. I mean, everybody wants what great is. There's nobody in the planet that doesn't want what great is. So if you can put it in the words, maybe we'll talk about that later, using their words and how to do
mm.
that. But if they can get that idea in their head, if they agree on what great looks like, they already then believe in your message, then it's just a matter of cherry picking what you need to then do after that from a technical close.
There's a couple things that you said even earlier that I just want to double click on just for a moment, Cliff, because I think they're so important. The first thing you mentioned is when you had that situation where the system wasn't working and you had to jump in and it was a hardware problem and you had to go to backups and then the backups weren't all there. You and the biggest observation for you was they couldn't do their job. And what you said was it was then that you realize that IT serves a purpose, and it's why you do what you do. I think for anybody listening to this, either here live or in the recording, this is one of the most important, at least first key takeaways, is understanding the purpose that your solution, your
Mhm.
platform serves, and understanding that there's really a higher purpose to what it is that we sell, right?
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, everybody has their own reason for doing what they do. And it almost doesn't matter what it is, as long as you can embody it and then um, communicate that to the person in front of you. Because if whatever it is that you believe, it makes you genuine.
Mm,
And that was one of those, not your six habits, but that other person who had his, bringing the human,
yeah,
about being genuine.
yeah.
And there's no substitute for that and getting somebody to believe what you believe.
Amen. Yeah, and that's, I think you may be thinking of Ron Whitson, who's releasing
Oh, his book, yeah.
a friendly human in pre-sales, and Be Authentic is he might be his first, certainly
Yeah.
one one or two in his list of 7
Yeah.
things. You mentioned the importance of words. You also mentioned the ability to communicate. So let's pick that apart a little bit. What have
Sure.
you found? What have you discovered is most important in the way you communicate and the words that you use?
Sure. So again, I know what I believe. I know from experience what I can do to help the customer. But if you look at it with the habits of influencing people, Dale Carnegie way back when, one of the things it says people like to hear their name, but people like also to hear their words. Every company has their own lingo, and
Amen.
it's so important to know what that lingo is and then use it. Whether it's the name of the building, their position name, the name of their data center, if there are certain lexicon items that their executive leadership uses in, for example, their annual reports, use those words and phrases. Now, you can't just, put them out there. You have to put them there and in your context, because you have to remain authentic. But it really helps when people hear language that they're familiar with. Right? It cuts through a lot of other things when you put them at ease. Number one, they also realize that you've taken the time to learn.
Exactly.
Taking that time to learn shows, again, empathy, that you really do. In fact, you care. You care enough to read the 10K, to read the annual report, to read the news releases from the PR folks put out there, that you took the time and effort to know something about them.
And
So
it demonstrates.
and that's the words. They're using those words. And there's also, we'll maybe get to that later, but words are that I use, that I chose for specific reasons, and I put definitions behind them, so that when other people come behind me, if they don't use those definitions, then they're blocked. It's part of that, again, getting people to believe what I believe.
Yeah. Well, and it's also demonstrating that you're paying attention. It demonstrates that you've done your homework. It demonstrates, and to your point, you said that every company has their own language, their own lexicon, their own terminology. Likewise, for those of us in the software selling role, the software sales role, every software company on the planet, we speak our own language.
Yeah.
And if we make the mistake of trying to just speak our language in front of prospects and customers, assuming they understand our terminology, we are also making a huge mistake.
Yeah.
So,
It's
Cliff,
another language.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Cliff. What's that?
It's another language. So
Exactly.
if you want to be successful as an SC, learn your internal language and then never use it again outside of your company. Yeah.
Yep. Incredibly well said. Cliff, let me push our pause button just for a moment, folks. I'm speaking to Clifford Barcliff. He is a technical evangelist and a longtime seasoned technical sales professionals. Now, and by the way, we don't see you out there. If you do care to say hello or ask any questions, please feel free to do so. I know we get started just a few minutes late, so hopefully you manage to hang around and or join us mid-flight. Cliff, the thing that struck a chord with me, we haven't touched on yet, but I want to bring that to the surface now, was when you said to me, Chris, I used to say I sell weekends. Do you care to share that story?
Yeah. When you're on an airplane, I was a specialist. So I got dropped in, right, over and over again, in and out, sometimes several times a week on an airplane for a visit. And who's on the airplane with you? It's other salespeople, and then some people on vacation. That's pretty much what I found out. And you have that conversation. Hey, what do you do? What do you do? You're always kibitzing. And at the time, I was selling software-defined storage solution. Some of the geekiest stuff that's out there. I mean, it really is. And by the time we got through it, it was tray tables up in the upright position and get ready to land, right? The person was, zonked out. So I had to come up with something that was better, faster, stronger. Also, at the time, I was with Symantec, and Symantec had purchased Veritas, and I was a specialist with the Veritas products. And people, who do you work for? Well, Symantec. Well, who's that? Well, I said, you probably know them for your desktop. Oh, Norton. Yeah, I know them. Oh, you do security. So, well, no, I have a data center business. Well, what does that mean? On and on and on and on. So I came up, you know what? There's got to be a better way. And then I was asked by my sales leader to visit a new account team. This was a healthcare team. It was a brand new vertical, a new set of AEs and SEs. They said, Cliff, they don't sell your product at all. In fact, they sold like one license, which I don't know how they could possibly do, all last year. Go, they're having their QBR, go and talk to them and do your thing. And so I show up, I'm in Tampa, I think. They don't know me, I don't know them. And I walk into the room and like, well, who are you? I said, well, I'm Cliff. Your sales specialist for software defined storage. And I'm like, well, what's that? All right, well, you're going to give me an hour tomorrow. I'll tell you tomorrow. So I went home, I thought about it, and actually did these things. I actually, on the hotel's laser printer, I printed up I sell weekends.
Hmm.
And so when I walked in the next day, so what do you do? Okay, well, think about it this way. I sell weekends. You all sell weekends. Well, what do you mean? Well, my software, right? Everybody you know in technology has had a bad day, has had a day where they had to miss the drinking on a Friday night, missed their kid's baseball game on a Saturday morning. They couldn't go to church on a Sunday morning, missed a wedding, missed a funeral, how to walk out on a date. All those things on our life outside. It's happened to me, by the way. For 20 years, I was that person carrying pagers and cell
Carrying the
phones.
pager. Yep.
Yeah, multiple. And so I said, so you have friends that have that? And they go, yes. Okay, if they use our software, that won't happen again.
Hmm.
I went, oh, okay. So without having to go in on why our software did all these great things with, depths on queues, on disk devices and clustering and all that kind of stuff, I said, no, their application never goes down, which means they never get their weekends interrupted.
Yeah.
That's what you need to know.
Yeah.
And so actually, so I have a sign that says I sell weekends. And then later on, talking to executives, I had, what else can I do? And I flip it over, it says I sell paychecks.
Hmm.
And again, the language is particular. It's not just, we've all heard a motor. In fact, every SE's probably gone to some internal trading and learning about money, time, and risk.
Yep.
But I said, it's very specific money. It's not just anybody's money. It's my money. It's
Hmm.
not anybody's time.
It's my time.
It's my time. So again, about language. So that's where the weekends and paychecks come from. It's very personal. And it's a very way to quickly get across to somebody what we're going to be talking about for the next half hour.
Yeah. It's interesting, Cliff. It reminds me of a time I was interesting. You mentioned the airplane. I was in Chicago O'Hare Airport on a very brief layover, and I can't remember where I was flying from and to, probably from California to Washington Dulles, where I live, and I bumped into a neighbor, ironically enough, who also happened to be a software sales professional. In fact, he was a software sales leader. Of course, I was a sales. I think, and thinking back at the time, maybe I was a sales enablement leader. And so, he and I chatted for a minute. He and I were on the same flight back to Washington Dulles. So we were chatting for a few minutes. And so he says to me, and this is before I launched this business, he said, so remind me again who you're with. And I shared the name. And he says, and what do you guys do? And then, and this was difficult to explain because we were sort of in like the software architecture analysis business, and it was very high tech, and it's hard to explain and exactly what we did. And so I attempted, and I'm in sales enablement, for crying out loud, right? And I still couldn't do it. And so after struggling for a couple minutes trying to explain what we did, and I'm sure he kind of sort of got it, but not really, and was probably bored with whatever it was I said. I said, well, and remind me, who are you with? And I don't remember exactly the name of the company, Penny Drop or something. And I said, what do you guys do? And these are his words. And ever since then, I've never answered that question the same. He said, companies use, I think it's Penny Drop. Companies use Penny Drop 2. I was like, oh my gosh, that is so brilliant.
Yeah.
Like, he instantly answered mine. And so now for all the clients that I work with, and for anybody listening to this, I'm going to give you a freebie here. If anybody ever asks you what your company does or who your company is, rather than say, because how do most people answer? Well, our company does, or our product does, or our product is, and it's really hard to explain. Simply answer, companies use blank for, or companies use blank too, or software companies use, or finance
Whatever.
companies use blank too.
Yeah.
It completely and totally changes the game.
Right. And only no more than 5, 6 words after that. It should be a sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One sentence.
Yeah, like one of my bigger clients is a company called Genetech, and they're in the physical security business, literally facilities, physical security, and they integrate cameras and badge readers and all, and gates and doors and all kinds of things like that. And we did this exercise, and afterwards I said, so from now on, whenever somebody says, well, what does Genetech do? So the answer is something like government facilities use Genetech to secure the premises and only allow authorized people in.
Simple. Yeah.
Boom. Right. Oh, okay. That makes
Doesn't matter
sense.
how you do it.
Well, and by the way, but then it invites, so how do you guys do it? Right? Or what makes you unique? Right? Now, to your point, now we're being invited to share more, right? Rather than us sort of pushing it on people.
Yeah.
Right.
I've had many sales reps complain to me, like, when are you going to start selling? You know, we're 10 or 20 minutes into a meeting. Cliff, when are you going to start selling? He's like, just give me another 5 minutes. And of course, eventually the customer asks.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and what they don't realize is you actually are selling.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're asking questions, you're being curious, you're trying to understand them, and you're leading them down a path to a point where they're saying, well, how can you guys help us with that? Right?
Yep.
Love this. Cliff, let me push pause again just for a moment, folks. I'm speaking to Clifford Barcliff. He is a self-proclaimed technical evangelist. He has, I'm just going to politely say, decades of experience.
Sure, 2, 3.
in the technical sales profession. And he's being a good sport because we were having some technical difficulties, and he agreed to just get out his phone, and you're doing a great job of holding it still. By the way, do you need to change hands, or
no, we're good. It's already
okay?
numb. Yeah.
So Cliff, we've talked a little bit about this, your background and how you discovered that IT serves a higher purpose. You discovered why it is that you do what you do. We've talked a little bit about the words we use and how we communicate. What are some of the other important lessons that you have learned in this role as a technical evangelist? And you just mentioned that the salespeople that you work with, they're eager for you to start selling, and you have a different approach. I'm curious to hear how you've learned to manage the relationship with the sellers who may feel a little impatient with the approach that you take with prospects and customers.
Yeah. So, eventually, you do this, you get a reputation. So that kind of helps when reputation precedes you. But with a new rep, or new SE, new sales leader, it's a lot of prep. I will tell you, I'm sure it's happened to you. I've flown to a location once, showed up, and I was the only one there.
Wow.
Everybody else was some other place. I'm like, well, why'd you fly me here? Yeah. For me, I fly American, so I go from Richmond to Charlotte or to Philly and then to somewhere. So, anytime I was asked for my time, there's always a prep call.
Yeah.
At least one.
Yeah.
Usually a few. It could be 15 minutes ahead of time, but preferably a day, to make sure that we understood the outcome. And so I always ask, okay, number one, what has to happen when we walk out the door? What is your, like? That's not my goal. What is your goal?
What
Right?
is the objective of the meeting?
Yeah. What is your objective? What should be the thing that happens? What do you want to happen? Do you want another meeting? Do you want to move up the chain? Do you want to get technical closure? What is your desired outcome? And based on that, that is when, we'll decide how my talk track goes, how my questioning goes, right? Even from how's the hallway conversation go. And then, and we agreed, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm only going to use a picture or 3 pictures well, you know what? This is just best left to a whiteboard. This is just best led to a tabletop.
Yeah.
And then we agree on what the medium's going to be.
Mm.
And then we take it from there. But we agree on the desired outcome, any medium, whether it's, whiteboards, presentations, rarely a demo from what I had to do. It was rarely a demo. It was usually just Cliff, do that thing. Basically convince them of what you believe. That's what I need.
Yeah.
So and once I've done it once for a sales rep, then it's just rinse and repeat, and they get it. But again, it's prep ahead of time.
What would you say to those people who might be listening to this, either live or the recording, who are saying, well, Cliff, I don't necessarily have a reputation that precedes me. And I'm doing these prep calls with my sales counterparts, but we're not getting agreement the way or as easily as you're suggesting. And maybe you found that there were times where you didn't necessarily get agreement. How did you handle those situations, and or what advice would you give to somebody who maybe is struggling to get agreement with their sales counterparts?
Yeah. So of course, it's all handled out of band, never in front of the customer, right?
Of course.
Not even in the parking lot, right? Because you never know who's listening, right?
Amen.
So
Or in the elevator, by the way.
Forget the elevator. I've made that mistake. You're not in the lobby. Wait till you're at the lunch in a quiet corner, where nobody else is around, and you have the conversation. Okay, that didn't work out. What went wrong? What could we do better? One of my enablement, Steve Theonis, he's our great enablement person, Steve T. Always do one thing good, one thing better. So what did we do good here?
Like that.
And what could we have done better to get a better outcome? What did it just figure out? And it's very, it's a way to do something that's very non-threatening. It's never, what did we do wrong?
Yeah.
We probably know what we did wrong, but what could we do better?
Yeah.
And it's a question for everybody that was on the call or in the room to figure that out. So very non-threatening. Of course, this is one of the times when maybe you need some coaching from one of your mentors or from your manager. If it's with your manager, then you go to your mentor and get the coaching from there. Yeah. And by the way, if you're going to have a mentor, it's good to have peer mentors, but it's even better sometimes also to have somebody who's maybe not in your org, but a few levels up. And that person probably has a position of view to help you then fix whatever, or give you some suggestions on how to fix, right? They should never tell you how to fix, but give you some ideas on how to approach the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, Ron Whitson chimed in. Ron, good to see you, my friend. Get off the property. Great advice. Yeah. I've made that mistake. And I think you mentioned this too, Cliff. We start having a conversation maybe in the lavatory or in the elevator, assuming wrongly that there's nobody within earshot. So yeah, now that's not as big of a problem these days in theory, because so many meetings are now held online, like the conversation you and I are having.
Always start a new Zoom meeting. Yeah, never use the old Zoom meeting.
Amen. Yeah, without a doubt. So Cliff, we've talked a little bit about sort of your, let's call it evolution through this industry and through your career from an IT professional. You finally, or you began to understand that IT really serves a higher purpose. You understood the why behind what you do. We've talked a little bit about how you manage, how you engage with customers, learning their language, how you are trying to really first sell ideas and help them see what you see and believe what you believe first. We've talked a little bit of how you deal with sales professionals. What would you say are some of the other important lessons that you have learned on this journey of becoming a technical evangelist?
Sure. So when since I've been unemployed now for a while, one of the things I've been doing on the side is coaching. So
Hmm.
every time I see somebody out there that's put up the green banner, I reach out and say hello. There's a ton of groups out there who get together who are recently unemployed. And I've been sharing, some ideas about, well, how do you advance? How do you get to be more? And I always tell people I was never just a systems administrator. I
Hmm.
was never just an SE. I was never just a product marketer. And what I mean by that is it's doing a little more in a strategic way. So you don't need to do everything, but to reach out, to be the person that reaches out first.
Hmm.
So the reason why I got my job in product marketing was I used to help write copy for the PMM team. They weren't necessarily technologists, but they like my reasons, right? Reasons for doing what I do. So they created videos based off of that. Hey, Cliff, can you help me? Can you do a demo that shows this? And then do a voiceover, and they'll do something with it. The one day I got a phone call. Hey, we have an opening, and my boss is looking for folks, and I thought of you first.
Hmm.
Says, well, it's not my product. Well, we know it's not your product, um, but that's not the reason, right? You're great with talking about ideas, and that's in marketing. That's what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with speeds and feeds per se. We're dealing with why the speeds and feeds are important, not
Yeah.
what they are. So
Yeah.
that's how I got my next gig,
Yeah.
was because I would reach out. I enjoyed reaching out. And the same thing happened with enablement. I didn't like the content that was being shared at, like, for example, at sales kickoffs. So I volunteered to help write some of the content. Then eventually, I was on the hook every single year for every SKO because, oh, Cliff, you're going to do it help this year, right? You're going to help write it and do the presentation, actually deliver it, right? Well, okay, sure. And then now you get to be a person who everybody knows. So even though enablement wasn't my gig, I got to be in front of all the sales leaders, people outside my own region. I got to be in front of the field marketing folks, and it could be inside sales, renewals, it didn't matter. Um, and then that's how you can become an Uber SE. I call that a tech evangelist. But by helping others, you will quickly see that as an individual contributor, you can have a lot of influence.
Hmm.
And that's why I enjoy that. I enjoy having influence, but only as an IC.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the word that comes to mind for me, Cliff, is proactive.
Hmm.
That you didn't sit back and wait to be invited to or asked to contribute in these ways. You saw a need, you saw an
Hmm.
opportunity to contribute, and you raised your hand and stepped forward and took the initiative to do so. And as a result, it gave you more visibility, it gave you more opportunity to speak, maybe in front of large groups, get in front of some of the marketing activities, or get in front of the marketing team, et
Hmm.
cetera. And I guess my question is a step further is what was your motivation? Is it just a drive to have more, and you mentioned the word influence. Is it
Yeah.
is it that drive to have more influence, to make a contribution?
So just like I like helping my customers see what great looks like,
Mm.
I wanted to help my peers and the sales team and the renewals team and marketing, right? And product management and the partners. I wanted them to see what great could look like. So the only way to do that is get involved further forward in the process. So, well, if I get my words used in enablement, then then other people can see, maybe for them, they can, know what great looks like for their customers. If I can get marketing to do that, now all of a sudden there's air cover coming in that's using these ideas and helping everybody else in the company. So it really was, I want people to know what great looks like. I'm pretty sure I have these ideas that work. And they've translated when I switched products even. Some of these ideas, I just had to change some of the words, but what great looked like didn't change a whole lot.
Yeah.
and I just use it with the new product set,
Yeah.
which is why I got asked to do the whole new product. So that's what it was. Really, I had been a manager back when I was an IT person at a bank. I had a big team under me. Wasn't my thing. So as an IC, that's how, and I know a lot of sales engineers, they won't advance, but they don't want to become SC managers, or they don't go into sales, but they do want to get, like, they're tired of the content coming to them that they get to use, or, they're not happy with something that they have to deal with. Well, number one, I used to ask my manager, hey, if something comes up, let me know and I will volunteer. So I ask, but I also just did, right?
Mm,
You just do. And after a
mm,
while, there's that old adage, do the job that you want, not the job you have.
that's good.
So you still have to do your day job, but on the side, little by little, I got to do the job that I really wanted by doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a great example of that principle right there. In so many ways, I've heard you share how you just took the initiative to, whether that was supporting marketing, working on enablement, and and coming full circle. Now I understand why you said, I didn't think of myself as, quote, just an SE or just a systems administrator, or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
Because I think the people who have that mindset, in their mind, I think something that goes with that is, well, that's not my job. And technically they might be right, but if you have a that's not my job mentality, that will probably be the only job that you have.
Yeah. And
But
that's
if
okay.
and that's
I mean,
okay.
yeah. It's just that, but if you see that you want to be able to change things, if you see that your ideas aren't getting the visibility, well, do something about it.
Amen.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge Ron again. Critical quality of the best technical sellers: always push to learn something new or take on new responsibilities. Really well said, Ron. By the way, folks, if you do care to say hi or ask Cliff any questions before we drop here, please feel free to do so. Cliff, we've got about 10 minutes left.
Yep.
There's a term that you have used quite a few times that I want to double click on, and then I'm going to ask you a question about this. The term that you've used a number of times is to see, or to show what great looks like. You use that in the context of working with prospects and customers. You also shared that in the context of working with some of your colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
I think it takes a great deal of confidence
Yeah.
to feel as though you recognize and can demonstrate or explain what great looks like. But I think in order to do so, it's important to maintain a certain sense of humility, and to build on what Ron said a moment ago. We need to be constantly learning and growing ourselves. So how do you balance, or how have you balanced being the expert, having the confidence to say this is what great looks like, but also keeping that ego in check a little bit, and knowing that you have to have a sense of humility, and you always have to be learning, which means you have to accept that you don't have all the answers. How have you balanced these two forces?
Well, simple answer is I've made some monster mistakes. And hopefully I've learned from them. I once tried to teach a bunch. I was telling the story at a regional QBR. It was a side meeting with one of the account reps. He was somebody who I'd worked with a couple of times with some of his big accounts. And he said, look, I'm having a problem with trying to convince this customer that we're relevant. What can I do? And so we sat there, over our lunchtime, talking about some ideas. And he goes, oh my God, I've never thought about these things before. And we're talking about stories and he goes, I've never heard you tell that story before. Well, I just made it up, but it was in this context. I said, wouldn't it be great if I can get a bunch of AEs to tell better stories, or even SCs to tell better stories? So I was asked to go to the West Coast, to their West Coast QBR, and I made up a bunch of assumptions. And we know what happens, right? And I did a couple of things. It was close to our headquarters. So I asked some of our leadership to actually show up to my presentation. And a couple did, actually. It was just, the next town over, and they showed up. And I was a little nervous because now I've got an audience, right? And money where my mouth is. And I get up there and I try to, talk interactively, in an enablement session, how to create your own story. And it fell flat, like just crickets. So much so that I had to get my manager, who was there, actually almost took the hook, the shepherd's hook, and kind of pulled me off the stage. And we had a chat afterwards. Is it, Cliff, you assumed something there? I mean, this is the benefit of somebody with more experience, my manager, who's a great guy. He says, the reps you talk to in your own patch, many of them came out of the data center. And they understood and had some empathy. The people we're talking today, they were all a lot of brand new reps. None of them have ever been in a data center. So you didn't connect right from the very get-go. So you actually lost them in the first 30 seconds.
Wow.
So what I realized is that what worked yesterday and what worked the day before and the day before the day before, and worked great. And, home run, not just singles, but, home runs, just doesn't mean it'll work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so so one of my valuable lessons is to never assume my audience, to make sure I understood my audience as best I could. And to know that the answer for yesterday's customer isn't the same answer for tomorrow's customer. Case in point was 2 customers not far from you. They are both satellite companies.
I can guess which ones, probably.
Two, and but they do business differently. One likes OpEx and one likes CapEx. It's just how their business operates. But they both put satellites up.
Yep.
Right. And if I hadn't realized that and spoke differently about my solution and how to incorporate it, it would have fallen on flat ears. Even though they were 2 companies that were both in the satellite business.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always telling myself, don't make that really horrible mistake again. And I make, every time you make that mistake, don't make it again. Learn from it. So it really was a couple times where I really botched it.
Yeah.
And learned from it.
Yeah.
And I continue to do that.
Yeah. Well, and it's such a powerful message, Cliff, and it's such a good way to end our conversation. I think a couple thoughts. First of all, it is in those moments where we fail and we have the courage to learn from those mistakes. And if I can say the wherewithal to not let that shoot us down so far that we're afraid to try again and stand back up. And the ability to then show up again with the same level of confidence, but with a hint of humility, knowing that, you know what, I'm going to give it my best shot, but it may not work, or this may not work. Cliff, it seems as though I've lost you. Are you still with me? I think I've just lost Cliff. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I know Cliff had some technical difficulties earlier. Oh, it looks like he's just rejoined. Let's see if we can bring him back just to say goodbye. Did you come back just to help me close it out?
Sure, why not?
Excellent. Well, what I was just saying, Cliff, is I just think there's so much power in the ability to learn from our mistakes. And here's the interesting thing, Cliff, as you were sharing that story, I was thinking to myself, anybody who might be listening to us now, or anybody who might catch the recording afterwards, even though they've heard the story that you just shared of you've got to know your audience, the truth is that more than likely they will make a similar mistake at some point in their career if they have not done so.
Yeah.
And this is something that came out in last week's conversation, and I feel like this is a really good follow on to that, and a really good way to close. If the goal in any meeting or anything that you're attempting, if the goal is to avoid failure at all costs, you are never going to grow.
Yeah.
But if the goal is to continue to grow and learn, then you're going to make failures.
Yeah. But they won't matter so much.
Right? What's that?
They won't make if that's your mindset. The mistakes, they don't matter so much.
They don't.
They become great stories sometimes.
Well, as you've shared, as you've demonstrated here today, and something that I didn't say last week, and I thought it and I didn't get a chance to say it, but because this has come back full circle, you've given me the opportunity. Failure is an event. I used to listen to Zig Ziglar. Many people are familiar with the name. Zig Ziglar used to say, failure is an event. Mistakes are events. They're not people. And so the more I think we can keep that in mind, the more we can learn from and grow from our mistakes. Cliff, it has really been a pleasure. I know we've had a little bit of technical difficulty, but I'm glad you and I stuck to it and made this work. Any closing thoughts from you as we wrap things up here?
Just for my fellow SEs, yeah, I always say find mentors. Ask your manager for what you want. It could be simple, saying, this is what I want. You might be surprised on what comes back. And if you don't get an answer, ask somebody else.
Very well said. And it's safe to assume, Cliff, that you'd be more than happy to have people reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. I love helping people. I've got a big connection list. I'm always happy to share it with folks.
Yeah, awesome. And by the way, let me just do a final shout out to Ron. Ron, thanks for chiming in. Hopefully, we had a few other folks online. If not, hopefully, I'm quite certain we'll have a few folks catch the recording. Cliff, thank you so much for being here. Hang around backstage just for a minute as we part ways. To anybody else who may be out there, thanks for listening in. If you care to follow or get alerts, you can follow #TechSalesAdvice. And we will be back I believe I'm back next week with another episode of Tech Sales Advice. Although I've got a 3-week road trip. So I may be a few weeks before we do this show again. Cliff, thank you so much for being here. To everyone else, be well, folks.
See y'all.